to blame the uptick in murders on the Democrats when these guns are the net result of Republican legislators allowing passes of legislation that promote anyone to have guns, even lunatics. So make sure you don't forget that. Hey, Milton, gun issue, bother me. They make this thing about, we want to hire more police officers, and in response to the uptick in shooting. Is that a solution, in your opinion, and why not?
No. I don't know the exact solution, but I suspect that you got to go to the head like you do in killing a snake or in taking care of a problem. And just we got to change our mentality about how we treat each other. Other countries live within a culture where people appear to be more respectful of each other, not necessarily have more material things, but like in Thailand, I was looking at a documentary. The streets are safe. People can go places at night. Women can travel by themselves and not be attacked or threatened. But here in this country, there is this, I won't say it's the Western mentality necessarily, but there's a mentality, I guess, that came with the taking of this country when we took it from the Native Americans, and we have this aggression, and killing is just part of that culture, Nathaniel. So I do believe personally that we have to start in approaching our culture towards violence, maybe first grade, kindergarten, whatever. We're just a killing country, man. And I don't think it would be as much if it didn't have this proliferation of guns, that everybody has a gun, but it's a culture here based on my little reading and just observation. The churches are not turning people out to love one another. It's the churches are getting very politicized now. They if you're not a Trumper, you may not be able to come to Sunday meeting. It's just that's how I see it.
Yeah, well, thanks for that comment, because one of the other things we've seen when Rudy Giuliani was mayor, their idea was hire more cops and then have cop harass black males. So when people use this code word, more policing, it's bring back memories to me, even in personal experience. When you have police officers that are out of control, that's no way to live.
No.
Because they have the ability to make a decision on your life while they're out in the field.
Again, you're talking about bringing in former military people, people who deal with enemy combatants, people who deal with situations where you don't have to worry about the constitutional right of the guy across from you. That's an enemy. You take him down. You don't think about his rights or the fact that that's a citizen who has a freedom of speech, etc. So the policing is not going to necessarily stop this violence when they bring violence to the situation based on their background. I'm not a psychologist or sociologist, but I'm an observer, and it's just a breeding and perpetration of us against them kind of mentality we live in, Nathaniel.
Okay, now the next big story that won't go away is the former president, Donald Trump, and you picked one of a half dozen cases, but the most fascinating case that I've been following is the indictment in Georgia by Fani Willis. This week, we saw the fourth Trump attorney, I mean, the third Trump attorney entered a guilty plea, General Ellis. Remember they had Rudy Giuliani and those three lawyers, Sidney Power, Kenneth Cheeseburger, and General Ellis. They were introduced and they had these crazy theories of the election fraud, which none of which was true. And they all, got bar complaints and look like they're all in a guilty plea. The only ones that haven't entered a guilty plea is Rudy Giuliani. But Ellis pleaded guilty to one count of aiding and abetting false statements and writing. In exchange for a guilty plea, she had to pay $5,000 restitution, complete 100 hours of community service, write an apology letter to the state of Georgia, but she's prohibited from contacting members of the media or any of the co-defendants. In the original indictment, Ellis was charged with one count of racketeering and one count of soliciting members of the Georgia Senate to violate their oath of office by falsely declaring Trump, not President Joe Biden, the winner of the state of Georgia. So she pled guilty to aiding and abetting attorney Rudy Giuliani and Ray Starlin Smith in knowingly and willfully and unlawfully making false statements to members of the Georgia Senate, including falsely claiming tens of thousands of illegal votes were tallied in the state's tight 2020 presidential contest. So in other words, everything they said in the election cycle, she admitted were not lies, but chronic lies.
Did she plead to a misdemeanor, Nate?
Well, the way I looked at this is that it was a low-level felony that could probably be converted to a misdemeanor.
Okay.
And so that felony, I'm assuming at the end of her probation, they'll probably have it erased, but meanwhile, she'll probably end up losing her law license. You can't, most states don't allow lawyers to be convicted of felony and keep the license. Minimum, she'll get a suspension. But
right.
Having said that, everybody now is ratting out their client, Donald Trump. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but Milton, the idea of a lawyer now testifying against their client?
I think there's something very, very wrong with the appearance that lawyers can so easily violate the confidentiality agreement of attorney-client. I don't know exactly how they're getting around it here, but like I brought up last week, a judge back there in your city in that Mike Tyson trial would not let the lawyer for Desiree Washington or her father take the stand and testify that his clients were lying in Mike Tyson's trial about what they were telling the jury. The judge felt, even though I disagree with a lot of the rulings of that court, but they felt that the sanctity of the attorney-client privilege was more important than the lawyer getting on the stand and impeaching his clients for the defense of a man in a criminal case. I don't see how you make an exception for these attorneys back there, other than they're not speaking of or turning in the actual conversations that they had with the president. Some way or another, they're getting around that, Nathaniel. Maybe I just don't have time to keep up with an analysis of this situation. I wish I did, but growing up now and getting senior, my time is taken up by the cases that I now still have. So that's my position on that.
Okay, we'll take a call, and callers, don't forget, our phone number is 833-653-3529, 833-653-3529. We'll take a call now. Emotep, how you doing today, sir?
Good morning, somebody. Great people.
Have you voted already? The big question today, have you already voted?
No, I'm not. I always like to go the day of, and I'm off that day, and I've never missed since 18 in any elections, no matter where I've lived, whether it was local or federal, so I'll be there. That morning, I like to get a pulse of who's there, what kind of people there, the crowd. Like when 2016 hit, I was there at Guyana Creek Middle School, and it was a large swath of white women in those lines. And according to the exit polls, even now, 58% of white women they think still support Donald Trump. So I'd like to get Attorney Banks' opinion on that when we get a minute. But three things I want to throw at you, which was great. The Senate, I just read this morning, that the Senate, looking at the Maine shooter, and Maine doesn't have any background checks or any red flags. I think they have a yellow flag law, but they don't have a red flag law. And they don't have background checks because Susan Collins just said that she didn't think that they needed to ban assault weapons, just high magazine capacity magazines. Well, the Senate itself, the governing body itself, with 5 Democrats caucusing with the Republicans, they voted to allow vets with mental illness to keep their weapons. And this gentleman was just divorced and had a strict divorce order, court order, that said, his gun should have been locked up. So it's a lot of failures around the system there. But the Senate, 5 Democrats, you caucus with the Republicans, and you allowed that veterans with mental illness to keep weapons. That's a conundrum to me. USA Today and the Brennan Center for Justice, along with police chiefs themselves, have said that more police does not reduce crime. Police actually, according to Harvard, Columbia, many other places, University of Chicago, police actually only prevent 6% of all crime. And then the new majority leader just said yesterday in the interview with Hannity, which I had to stomach through because I can't stand, but I learned years ago with my early teachers that you got to listen to those that you don't like to understand how they think. The new majority leader said they didn't need to address guns. They don't need to do anything about guns. Banning assault weapons don't need to. It's all bad hearts. Well, the rest of the world has chimed in on TikTok and Twitter and everywhere else, and the rest of the world says, people got bad hearts all over the place. But let's name about 50 countries that doesn't happen. Norway, Sweden, Finland, Britain, they're just going down the list. Singapore, Germany, going down the list. So this heart thing that he threw out there the other day is crazy. You can see we have insane people running our part of our government. And that's an issue. So I just want to throw that out there. And then thanks for the call. And then last thing, brother, you can touch on 1 week. Can you touch on pardons and reason why we're not getting the pardons like we should see, even for nonviolent offenses? What is the problem with getting these pardons? And thanks for taking my call.
Back up a second. In our state, you could get expungement of your records, and so our law firm we did a couple hundred of those expungement of records as part of a church program and stuff like that. So you don't need a pardon for the nonviolent offenses in Indiana because you can get your record expunged. Everything is erased, and so as though it never existed. And in fact, once you get an expungement, if somebody try to use that to bring the record up, it's a violation of statute. It's the misdemeanor, so they can be prosecuted for trying to use the prior expunged record against you in any method. So therefore, you don't need to have the pardon. The second thing Attorney Grimes that he brought up was about the Maine vote. As always, he was accurate about that. The Senate, including 5 of the Democrats, did vote to allow weapons for soldiers who have mental disabilities, which is a mistake. And I think that they regret that. But what they were trying to do was treat veterans for their service to the country no different than an ordinary citizen. But there is a difference, because when you were in the military, particularly your infantry special ops, they train you to do one thing, to kill people. And so if you're trained to kill people, all the training is in terms of weapons training, your martial art training or defensive training or offensive training, baton training, it's for death and destruction. So yeah, I think that's probably a mistake, Milton, that says that military people with veterans with disability, mental disability, should be able to get guns. That's a mistake. I'm a veteran. My dad was, my brother was. I just think it's a dumb idea.
Right, I agree. I agree, and it goes with my earlier statement that increasing the police department or bringing in veterans to be police officers, you're contributing to the problem because they've been trained to kill first and not to deal with the social issues that law enforcement officers are oftentimes faced with. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book not long ago, Talking to Strangers, and he addresses that issue in the back of his book about our need to hire law enforcement personnel with a higher education than what they average now and to pay them more money because it's a serious position in our society. And we don't need to be bringing in more people who are not qualified to deal with the situations and problems they have, who's not educated enough, who's not trained sufficiently to deal with the problems that we have. We're just going to have more of the same problems.
Good point. Okay, Mr. Pullen, what's your issue for today? What's your response, sir? We're going
thank you for. Are you there?
Yeah, we're doing fantastic. Thanks for calling today. What's your issue for today?
Oh, well, my issue for the day is, and I was specifically want Milton and Vanita to know. Last week, you had the Marion Democratic Party chairman on, and you didn't talk about the court ruling from the Seventh Circuit in my case that came down where you guys, she essentially, they ruled against me and threatened me with court fines and sanctions. And I just thought, you had her on your show right then and there, why you didn't raise that court case from the Seventh Circuit, and nobody's talking about it here in Indianapolis. And you didn't raise it on your show, and I was just kind of interested. You had her right there, and you didn't talk about it. And I just wanted to tell Milton and Vanita, see, that's the things that we deal with in this city. You have major court case from the Seventh Circuit, and right or wrong, whether you like me or hate me, nobody's talking about it in the news media or anything. And that was an elections fraud case. And I just, it's Pierre Pullins versus Kate Sweeney Bell now because they changed offices. But I was just interested why you didn't talk about that.
The reason I didn't talk about it, Mr. Pullen, is very simple. There are probably, conservatively speaking, about 40,000 lawsuits that are pending in our jurisdiction somewhere. And so there's so many lawsuits. In every lawsuit, in my mind, they're all important lawsuits. And so,
but you had the
second thing,
person
though,
on your show.
But yeah, I know. But the government, I sue the city of Indianapolis all the time. I support the mayor and I contribute to his campaign. But the fact that I file a lawsuit against the city all the time, it's not, in my mind, the type of thing that I need to discuss on the show because it's in the court system. I'm going to win the case at trial. Wait a second, let me finish. I sue people, I win the case at trial. I've been doing this for 42 years, 190 jury trials, about 98% success rate. So the net result is I don't advertise my lawsuits, nor if I talk to mayors, I talk to them about the fact that I'm suing them. Because when I do a trial or a case, it's in the courtroom. Now, in your case, essentially, it pointed out in the order that you had ran unsuccessfully several times for a seat in the United States House of Representatives, and your lawsuit
so you
was
read
dismissed.
I'm sorry. Right. Well, my point is that was a court case from the Seventh Circuit concerning election fraud, and nobody said anything about it. And you had the defendant appellee on your show, and you didn't ask her about it, and you brought her on a couple days after the court ruling came down. And I'm just saying, you guys want to keep information from the people. And like I said, right or wrong, or whether you hate me or like me, I mean, that is public information that needed to be known. But you guys won. So I'm like, and you didn't even bring it up.
Wait a second. Hey, wait a second. I'm not part of you guys. You know, I sued the city.
No, you're part of the Democratic establishment
in
here
other
in
words,
Indianapolis.
but I successfully sued the city. Here's the problem in your case. In your court opinion, it says this. Over the years, Poland has filed 21 cases in the Southern District of Indiana, basically against high-ranking executives of Amazon, Walmart, and other businesses with no apparent relation to him, and against federal, state, and local officials, including former president and judges. Only 2 of his cases lasted as far as the summary judgment stage, and each have ended in a judgment against them. On appeal, this court has considered none had merit. They said that you had a barrage of frivolous litigation and it must stop. So in other words, the case that you're arguing about, the court says that it was so bad that you should never file more cases like this again. That's part of your court decision.
Well, I get to respond, but the point is, so what? I mean, I'm an American citizen. I have a right to file a lawsuit if I feel like, and here's the thing that they don't tell you, Nate, I asked for an attorney. I asked for legal assistance from the court, but the chief judge, he left that out. And they always leave that out. So I don't just go into court, file a lawsuit. I ask for legal assistance, and they always say, well, we'll look into it or do this, that, and the other. The point is, that was an election fraud case, and nobody's talking about it. And there's a lot of things that court ruling left out.
Mr. Pullins, I'm going to have to interrupt you. I'm going to have to interrupt. There are a lot of important cases in all the courtrooms throughout this country, here in LA and New York, Indianapolis. I think it's a matter of selecting cases that has the public attention and public interest. I don't think there was an intention, definitely not on my part. I don't know anything about your case. I don't like or dislike you. So you're really coming off, I don't think with the information. I don't have any information about your case, but I think topics and subject
matter. I wasn't accusing you, Milton.
Yeah, but topics and subject matters for a radio show are picked because of the public interest in them a lot of times. And that's just how things are done. I'm sorry that it's not to your satisfaction what we discussed on this show, but I think I've known you now for a few years. I know your name. I know you get a voice on this radio show. So I don't know how it was overlooked last week, but I'm sure it was not intentionally done. So
of course it was. Of course it was, Milton.
Actually, wait a second. Let me correct something real quickly. It's something very important. The lawsuit actually changed the name to Kate Sweeney Bell, not Myla Eldridge. So when you say that Myla Eldridge was on the lawsuit, if you look at your court order, it says we substitute Kate Sweeney Bell, the current clerk of Marion County and Secretary of the Election Board, for Myla Eldridge.
That's what I said.
Right. So you were saying complain about Myla Eldridge being on the show. That's not even the correct defendant anymore. It's on the first page of your court order. Look at the very first page.
I know what it is. I read it, and I told you that the name had been substituted. I'm just saying, you had her on the show last week. You didn't tell the 2 other attorneys about it. Court case from the 7th Circuit. I just thought it would have been appropriate.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Now back to this bill, Milton. These guilty pleas down in Georgia, and we have, for the record, folks, we have thousands of lawsuits. The city and the state get sued all the time.
Right.
I filed a lawsuit against the mayor's office, all the time. The police officers that they're advocating getting more police officers, they still engage in misconduct on a regular basis. I represent a lot of officers in accidents and things like that, but we have some officers that still improperly shoot our citizen and kill them. You know, I'm troubled this week, for example, about the young man on Tuesday morning that got shot in a tree. And I was thinking to myself, why would a police officer think they need to shoot a guy in a tree who's obviously trying to escape? And then we'll probably try to claim that, oh, he had a gun. Well, they didn't find a gun. The point I'm making is that hiring more police officers, like Milton said, is not the solution. That's a guy that probably still should be alive if the police officer had used common sense.
Right.
I know that officers have to make quick decisions, but when a person is in a tree trying to hide, that gives me some indication that maybe that person is trying to avoid any conflict with the police officer, and you just wait them out. You wait a little bit longer, let the situation de-escalate, and the person surrenders. You don't have to murder him or kill him. And that's my take on it.
Agreed.
And see, my problem, Milton, all over the country now, they're making these contentions, even locally. We want to hire more police officers. You know, public safety has become a dominant issue. And the obvious thing that these politicians overlook it, who are making this argument, because most of the major cities in America are controlled by Democrats. And in the urban areas, you have a lot of shooting. But these guns are not made in these cities where the shooting are occurring. The manufacturers are importing the guns into the city because state laws and legislators controlled by Republicans pass these loose gun laws. In our state, unfortunately, they passed a gun law that did not require you to get a gun permit anymore. Now, what was wrong with doing a gun permit? What did a gun permit consist of? Well, you had to go to police, state police or the city police and do a background check. Then the background check, for example, if you've been convicted of domestic battery, you wouldn't be allowed to get a gun permit. If you had prior been convicted of murder or rape or incest, you can get a gun permit. So what was wrong with those sensible laws that restricted people from getting a gun who had a background that maybe suggests that if they engaged in the conduct in the past, that is more likely than not that they is the type of person that may engage in the conduct in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem we have, Milton, is there's too many guns.
Yes, too many guns, and it goes back. I don't know, Nate. I just have a problem with our culture and the mentality of our culture and the violence that we promote somehow. I think that's one of the problems we have in the violence in this country. Yeah. Even in the churches, it seems like violence is endorsed, if not promoted.
Now, you know, one of the things, Milton, I want to make clear to everybody that there's something that people don't really know, that is gun violence is not the #1 source of death in our country or in our city.
Oh.
Surprisingly, in 2021, for example, in America, suicide, 50% of all gun-related deaths were suicide, 26,328 people, while 43% of 20,948 were murders. So in other words, more people statistically died because they killed themselves than killing other people, even with guns, not counting the people that are doing drug overdose. So in our city, we probably have, I don't know the latest statistic, probably about 60% of the deaths in our city, homicide, are caused by suicide or fentanyl. Yeah, we do have a problem with gun violence, but let's not forget that suicide is a major problem in our city, our state, in America. And that, Milton, is something that's often overlooked. That it's not just guns where people killing other people. These guns, these people killing themselves. In the main
Again,
case,
it goes back to the mental, to mental illness and the culture and the violence of this culture that I believe is all involved in people killing others and committing suicide. We need to address the mind. We need to address the mentality of the people, and we don't do that very well. We
well,
don't.
what about this? In your city, do they have a program in place now that deal with the mental illness in terms of policing? Do they have any
Yeah,
program like that yet?
Yeah, they have some inept. Let me slow down. They have some programs, but the effect of them is not being is not accomplishing their goal, from my understanding. They have a lot of programs with a lot of chiefs and a lot of individuals managing and getting paid, but the people who need the services are not receiving the services on the whole, Nathaniel. So we talk it, but we don't do it. We don't address the mental illness of people who are on the streets and susceptible and victimized by violence all the time and need some help to keep from hurting others or committing suicide. We have a dire need for more intervention in people with mental illness, and we still haven't fulfilled that need, Nathaniel, in most cities.
Well, what I think that instead of people saying we need more police officers, I think that we need to expand the scope of this to deal with the mental health issues.
Yes.
I think that we first got to address the gun violence by restricting the proliferation of the sale of these weapons of mass destruction and suicide and homicide. We got to restrict gun usage. We're 3% of the world's population, but yet we're over 50% of private gun ownership in the world. You know, we look at these countries where people are having wars and uprising, and you know, there's hundreds of people being killed in these different countries during war. Well, we have that many people in America that die by suicide, homicide, or fentanyl or drug overdose.
Right.
And we blame local politicians, but then the core of the problem is that we have Republicans in Congress that won't agree to sensible legislation, Milton. We have a problem in the sense that NRA make substantial contributions to their campaign, and they're like puppets. Things that obviously protect individual is almost like they're tone deaf.
Right.
And then every now and then they get it. You have a tragedy like what happened in Maine this week, Milton, and all of a sudden they say, well, maybe there's something we need to do about these weapons of mass destruction.
Yes. But again, it goes to, you said this man had gone through a divorce, the man in Maine?
Yes.
Yeah. And divorce court, I stopped doing divorces early in my practice of law, I think in the first 3 years, because of I tried to resolve a dispute between a man and a woman in my office, and he hit her. And I decided then I can't do family law. It's too violent. So we see more violence in family law than we see in criminal law. You know, in that attorneys are killed more often in family law matters than, say, in criminal law. So our culture has to accept the fact that we got a mental illness problem, or we have a violent culture that needs to be addressed from an early age, and people learn how to cope with their anger other than striking out and beating somebody to death and glorifying brutality. I keep coming back on that. I keep harping on that because everything I read and everything I see points to that. We don't know how to cope with disputes as well as we should.
Well, what was interesting about the main shooter in Milton, guy's name was Robert Card. His ex-wife and his teenage son were in hiding as they had the manhunt looking for him. Robert Card was an Army reservist. He was age 40, and he was the father of an 18-year-old son named Colby from his prior marriage to Kara Lamb. 2 years after they got married, they ended in a divorce. And after they found out that he had rampaged, Lamb and her son were in hiding, from him. But there was some report that Card was trying to locate his ex during a deadly rampage at the restaurant in Bowling Alley in Lewiston, Maine on Wednesday night. So, I'm not sure where this investigation is going, but, in the divorce action, he represented himself, and the divorce lasted several years. And his child support order only required him to pay $74 per week in child support. And so it looked like they make it appear in a news article that maybe he was still upset at his wife and were looking for her, and she vanished while they were still looking for her. And so we see, yes. So, Milton, we see a lot of that. I mean, you probably had personal experience of these people that go off the rail, they have mental illness and try to kill their spouses.
Yeah. I have done a lot of mental illness defenses, and even to degree, I've accomplished convincing the jury that the person was temporarily insane during the commission of the killing. Again, I keep harping on this need for education and treatment of our mental ill people. And we have a whole lot of them that don't know how to deal with, don't have the coping skills to deal with the challenges they face in relationships or in a lot of other situations. People just get frustrated and give up. We don't know how to love one another as well as we should, Nathaniel. And again, I go back to other countries, less industrialized, less less material wealth, but the people have family values and love, and they get along with each other better, and they don't resolve their conflicts the way we do ours. So if we don't want to face.
Well, in general, Milton, how do they deal with this mental illness defense in the court system that you dealt with over the years? I mean, what do you do? How do you prepare that? How do you defend the mental, and what the steps you have to go through to provide this defense?
Well, I go back to the birth, to the cradle, to the womb, on developing how a person's mental condition is developed. I mean, I've had young men, 17 years old, serial rapists and killers, and find out that from the time they were in their mother's womb, they suffered from violence, that the father beat the mother, hospitalized the mother with beating, shot a shotgun between her legs. And the science is that even when you are in the womb, you are traumatized by the environment and things that happen. They've done experiments in showing that babies who listen to a calming music while the mother is pregnant come out a certain way. Babies who listen to or rock music or heavy metal music, they come out all jittery in a certain way. So we do have a lot of data and research on how mental conditions are developed in our people. But it seems as though when we become adults, we throw that aside and we don't use it and recognize it. But getting back to your point, how do we deal with it in the courtroom? We have to go back to how this person was treated, what developed their anger over time. You know, was it because they didn't look like someone else, or because the teachers didn't treat them right, or because they were bullied? And I just had this little kid, this little girl in Salt Lake City who 10 years old hung herself because she was being bullied in school and mistreated in school. A lot of people come out of the situation that she was in being angry and being mean, violent adults because they were bullied and people didn't recognize it or come to their aid. So we got a lot of things, Nathaniel, in our society that we have to address for the people, and intervene and help them. And we don't do it as well as we should. I mean, this school district in Utah is rampant with calling kids the N-word because there's so few of them. And it's dominated by the Mormon religion. And that thing is, you be a good Mormon and you die and you go to heaven and become white. Now you've been saved. And otherwise, you just what we call you, and you are what you are. And the Justice Department went in there and found out, yeah, there's a lot of racism here in a whole state that people are going to be suffering by when they become adults. But so we got to go back to the core. What molded, what happened to this person throughout their life? And we got to recognize that we have institutional failure in our school systems predominantly, and in all of the other systems that we're involved in. There's a failure to help people the way they should be helped. And
now, as a general rule, do they have to have psychiatric evaluation of people raising these mental defenses? And what's the process?
Yeah, they are evaluated by the defense lawyer and the defense doctors, and then the people have a right to get the data and the information that was used to evaluate them and decide whether or not this person is mentally ill or not. I mean, it's done before trial. If you feel as though your client is so mentally ill they cannot assist you in the defense of their case, then you do a motion to have them declared incompetent to go to trial. And they're taken aside and evaluated by the criminal, the penal institution, by psychologists, by psychiatrists, by social workers, and observed for several months. And a determination is made whether they are not even competent enough to go to trial, whether they understand the nature of the proceedings and are able to assist their attorneys in the defense. And if they are, then they go to trial. If not, they're kept from going to trial for a while. So, yeah, we got that system set in place, but oftentimes judges will listen to prosecutors and just declare a person competent and send them on through the criminal justice system. And they wind up in prison with no treatment for their mental illness, and they come out. Do you think they're better? Do you think they've gotten better when they haven't been treated and they've been ignored and people abuse them and bully them? No, they come out angry. So, yeah, we have systems in place, Nathaniel, but they don't always work.
And so when this defense is raised in the course of a jury trial, there's two scenarios. They could be found, guilty, but mentally ill, or not guilty by reason of insanity.
I've done several murder cases where the client was found not guilty by reason of insanity because you develop sufficient enough evidence to show that this person is mentally ill. So a jury can find them, but it's not the easiest defense to succeed in. People are suspicious about mental illnesses. A lot of people think it's faked. So you got to do a lot of work to show that throughout this person's life, they've shown symptoms of it and indicators of it. They just didn't all of a sudden become mentally ill. And a lot of schizophrenics, I understand that illness doesn't set in until you become a young adult, 18 or 19 years old. So you don't always have the symptoms in early age. But what was your question? I'm sorry.
Well, that was great. Now, the other part about this, what happened to the person? You've been very successful in terms of winning these cases all over the country, but what happened when a person is found guilty? I mean, guilty, or wait, say not guilty, but mentally ill. Does that person then have to go to a special type jail or something?
For lack of a better, I had a woman who killed her baby, and we were successful in convincing the judge that she was insane at the time she killed her baby. She suffered from postpartum psychosis. She put her baby under the back tire of the car, drove over its head and crushed its head, and came home and told her husband that a Black woman had kidnapped the baby. She was a white woman. And we were successful in showing the court that she was insane temporarily because of the postpartum psychosis effect on her at the time she killed her baby. He changed the jury verdict and found her not guilty by reason of insanity. The jury found her guilty of murder, insane. And on a motion after the trial, the judge agreed with me and found her that she hadn't committed murder. She had committed the lesser crime of manslaughter, and that she was not sane. She was insane at the time. And that was 30 years ago. And she is still been declared insane. But since then, she's gone on and had another family, had another child that graduated from college about 3 years ago. And she's doing well. But the prosecution refused to agree that she's now sane, even though the treatment facility that she's associated with, going to see every 3 months, says she should be released from their program because they can't do any more for her. And her sanity has been restored. She is no longer insane, but they refuse because of resentment of the outcome of the case. But that verdict, not guilty by reason of insanity, can stay with them a lifetime, that they're still looked upon as insane, that they can't travel out of the state unless they get court permission. In this case, it's been 30 years ago, and she still has to, and she's remarried and has proved herself as sane as you and I, but she still has the restriction of travel on her, and she still has that conviction of not guilty by reason of insanity. And her sanity hasn't been restored yet.
Well, you know, I don't think that most people realize that because a person is rendered not guilty by reason of insanity, they walk scot-free the rest of their life. I don't think most people realize that they lose certain rights and privileges and have very a lot of restriction on their movement, I guess, sounds like. Is that right?
Right. She has restriction on her movement to this day. Yes.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much for your comments all the time. I'd like to thank our audience for listening to us each week. And as I told you earlier in the show, if you haven't voted, there are early voting sites. You could look at it on the internet and go out and vote, because in the Indianapolis mayor race, your vote is important. We made a lot of progress, particularly in racial issue and diversity, and let's continue the momentum, folks. But in order to do that, you have to vote. Get your friends, your neighbors, and everybody you know to go out and vote, because voter turnout is vitally important in our neighborhoods in order for us to have a successful outcome in the election. Well, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for our callers, and most of all, you, the listening audience. Thank you, and have a blessed day. Take care, everyone.
Bye, Dave.
Bye-bye.